exploring periods like the Renaissance, Baroque, or the Harlem Renaissance and their lasting impacts. Throughout history, art, culture, and intellectual thought have evolved through distinct periods, each leaving a profound impact on society. Today, we explore three such transformative periods: the Renaissance, the Baroque era, and the Harlem Renaissance. From the rebirth of classical learning to the grandeur of dramatic art and the explosion of African American creativity, these periods continue to shape our world. The Renaissance, 14th to 17th century, seen shifts to images of Renaissance art and architecture. Host: the Renaissance, meaning rebirth, emerged in Europe as a revival of classical Greek and Roman ideas. It began in Italy and spread across the continent, influencing art, literature, science, and philosophy. Visionaries like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Galileo reshaped human understanding. This era saw the rise of humanism, emphasizing individual potential and intellectual curiosity. Host: beyond art, the Renaissance fueled advancements in science and technology. Copernicus and Kepler redefined our understanding of the cosmos, while William Harvey explored the human circulatory system. The Renaissance was also a time of political transformation, with figures like Machiavelli shaping modern political thought through works like The Prince. Economic developments flourished, with trade routes expanding and banking institutions growing. Lasting impact of the Renaissance. Host: the Renaissance laid the foundation for modern science, education, and democracy. The printing press revolutionized communication, making knowledge accessible to all. Even today, Renaissance principles inspire art, architecture, and innovation. The architectural principles of symmetry and proportion established during this period continue to influence contemporary design. Additionally, the Renaissance emphasis on humanism inspired future intellectual movements, such as the Enlightenment. The Baroque period, 17th to 18th century, seen transitions to grand Baroque architecture and paintings. Host: following the Renaissance, the Baroque era emerged, characterized by drama, emotion, and movement. Art and music became more elaborate, with figures like Caravaggio, Bernini, and composers like Bach and Vivaldi leading the way. This period reflected the grandeur of the Catholic Church and absolute monarchies, using artistic expression to captivate and influence. Host: theatrical performances and grand opera productions became central to Baroque culture. Literary works reflected a heightened sense of drama and complexity, with authors such as John Milton writing epic poetry, like Paradise Lost. The period also saw the emergence of influential philosophers, including René Descartes, whose ideas laid the groundwork for modern rationalism. Lasting impact of the Baroque period. Host: Baroque artistry remains central in music, theater, and architecture. The dramatic storytelling techniques we see in film and opera today are rooted in Baroque expression. Churches and palaces worldwide still reflect its opulence and power. The influence of Baroque music extends into modern compositions, with its complex harmonies and ornate structures inspiring contemporary orchestral works. Additionally, the theatrical elements of Baroque literature continue to shape modern storytelling. The Harlem Renaissance, 1910s, 1930s, seen changes to vibrant images of Harlem, jazz clubs, and literary figures. Host: fast forward to the early 20th century, and we witnessed the Harlem Renaissance, an explosion of African American culture in New York. This movement saw the rise of literary giants like Langston Hughes, musicians like Duke Ellington, and artists like Aaron Douglas. It was a period of racial pride, creative expression, and intellectual thought that redefined African American identity. Host: the Harlem Renaissance was more than an artistic movement. It was a social revolution. It provided a platform for discussions on racial equality, with figures like W.B. Du Bois advocating for civil rights and social justice. The rise of jazz and blues influenced mainstream American music, breaking racial barriers in the entertainment industry. Writers such as Zora and Neale Hurston captured the African American experience through literature, while artists painted powerful representations of Black identity. Lasting impact of the Harlem Renaissance. Host: The Harlem Renaissance laid the groundwork for the civil rights movement and transformed literature, music, and visual art. Jazz, born in this era, remains a global phenomenon. African American voices gained prominence, shaping cultural and political discourse for generations. The themes explored in Harlem Renaissance literature, identity, resilience, and racial pride, continue to resonate in contemporary literature and media. Moreover, the movement established Harlem as a cultural capital, inspiring future artistic movements. Conclusion. Host stands in front of a collage featuring all three periods. Host. The Renaissance, Baroque, and Harlem Renaissance, three distinct eras, yet each ignited cultural revolutions that continue to shape our world. Whether in the art we admire, the music we hear, or the freedoms we celebrate, these periods remind us of humanity's endless capacity for creativity and progress. Host. From the Renaissance's intellectual awakening to the Baroque era's grandeur and the Harlem Renaissance's fight for cultural recognition, each movement has left a legacy that still resonates today. The echoes of these transformative periods can be seen in our modern world, in the architecture we build, the music we compose, and the literature we cherish. Closing shot with inspiring music and images of modern-day influences. Host. What other historical movements have left their mark on our world? Let's keep exploring, learning, and growing. Until next time. The Renaissance, which means rebirth in French, typically refers to a period in European history from AD 1400 to AD 1600. Many historians, however, assert that it started earlier or ended later, depending on the country. It bridged the periods of the Middle Ages and modern history, and, depending on the country, overlaps with the early modern, Elizabethan, and Restoration periods. The Renaissance is most closely associated with Italy, where it began in the 14th century, though countries such as Germany, England, and France went through many of the same cultural changes and phenomena. However, while the Renaissance brought about some positive changes for Europe, the geographical exploration that flourished during this time led to devastation for the people of the Western Hemisphere as European conquest and colonization brought plagues and slavery to the indigenous people living there. In Africa, it also brought about the birth of the transatlantic slave trade that saw black people shipped from Africa to the Western Hemisphere to work as slaves on European colonies. Renaissance comes from the French word for rebirth. According to the City University of New York at Brooklyn, intense interest in and learning about classical antiquity was reborn after the Middle Ages, in which classical philosophy was largely ignored or forgotten. Renaissance thinkers considered the Middle Ages to have been a period of cultural decline. They sought to revitalize their culture through re-emphasizing classical texts and philosophies. They expanded and interpreted them, creating their own style of art, philosophy, and scientific inquiry. Some major developments of the Renaissance include astronomy, humanist philosophy, the printing press, vernacular language and writing, painting and sculpture technique, world exploration, and, in the late Renaissance, Shakespeare's works.